Okay, so let's start. So, welcome to everybody in our last webinar of this series. So, it is the sixth webinar. We had already 5 webinars in the past month, and I hope most of you have participated. If not, feel free to rewatch the registrations of those webinars, which you can find on our website. Just register, it's for free, and you can watch the webinars. On today's webinar, this is a bit more special than the last one, so there are no presentations foreseen. This is a webinar which we call the expert panel and question and answer session. So you are very much encouraged to raise your questions, and our experts will provide you some answers. To raise your questions, the way to do it, just use the chat function in Teams to put your questions down, and some of our experts will pick it up and then answer your questions. So feel free, and I really encourage you to be very proactive in asking questions. You can even start right now to put your questions down in the chat functions. I'd just like to mention that the webinar will be recorded as the other ones, so it usually takes 1 or 2 weeks until we do the polishing up of the registrations, and then the webinar will be as well available on our website. We have planned today, from a timing wise, 1 hour to 90 minutes for the question and answer sessions. And I think we can jump right into it. I'd like to do a very short introduction of our expert group, which is participating today. So we have Heinrich Katz. He's the CEO from Hermetia Barut GmbH, and as well a board member of IPIF, the European Organization for Insects for Food and Feed. So I think it might well be that many people of you know him. He is a well-renowned expert in the insect industry. He's running his own farm as well with black soldier fly, and he's rearing and raising as well some other insect species. Secondly, we have Lukas Hartmann. Lukas is, I would say, almost an old friend of mine. We've been working together for some time. He is now one of the founders of Seprico. Seprico is on the mealworm side, I would say, located in Germany. And his background, he's a biologist, but he covers as well, let's say, any kind of questions about, let's say, automation of insects, farming and things like that. So he's well positioned to answer your questions on that. Then we have Kifa Yao. He always says the Chinaman for insects and cooking. So he's let's say the multi-tool in the insect school, based in the Netherlands. He is doing some technical research, and as I already mentioned, he is focusing as well on training, supporting customers in education on insects. Then we have Mas Kwerbeck. Mas is currently still working at DTI, but he's planning to start doing his own consulting business in the insect industry. So he's done a lot of research in this area on as well substrates and many other things. And by the way, he as well had run a black soldier fly based in Denmark. Finally, we have Arthur Kühl. He is one of the co-founders of ento-connect, as you see it in the background. In the same time, he is as well the CTO of Reinhardt. So his background, he's an engineer, so he's doing a lot of projects globally, as well in Asia and some other countries. Helping customers to do the engineering of the insect farm and getting the machinery, tooling, processes, and everything right. So that's the person to talk to if you want to talk about as well machinery, and especially his a core focus on processing of insects. And then finally, myself, Bernd Rausch. My background is more of coming from the consulting industry, so I'm more in the delivery side and project management, and I'm as well a founder of ento-connect. So let's jump right into it. Up to now, still, please, if you have questions, I strongly suggest raise your questions. We have prepared maybe some questions, and as we know that the participants are widely spread, not only geographically, but as well widely spread in a sense of prior experience in the insect industry. So I may say, let's just jump right into it. We have prepared some questions. So maybe I start with a simple one. How do I best select the most suited insects? So, I think one of the key questions when you start thinking about insect industries is the question, which insect species I actually take into account. And so I would not say which are the pros and cons, but I think what are the key drivers and aspects to consider when choosing an insect species for insect farming, so on and so on. So who of the experts is raising his hands to answer this question? Heinrich.
Yeah, I'm the oldest person in this panel, and so I take the chance to answer this question, or try to answer. It's not easy to answer. Of course, first you have to ask what purpose you want. Basically, food or feed, and from down to then you come to the next question. If you go to food, which one suits best your parameters and to feed as well. From my perspective, I make it easy and I want to make it short. I think in terms of food, there are several. And you have to think about which one the mealworms and number one, I guess. And then all the others on the list going down. I'm more specialist on the feed side. There, I think right now there are only 3 suitable, and this is of course the mealworm, it's the silkworm, and it's the black soldier fly. However, there are probably 2 million, 5 million species out there. Maybe we need to go forward in a more scientific way and do a screening and look for parameters. What do we need? Let's say amino acid spectrum or enzymes for having certain problems with the substrate, and then look around what is available. And then maybe we find a better one. But actually, I think there are these 3 I mentioned in the feed in feeding purposes. And then you have to think about what substrate is available, what kind of energy or is energy available, and all these things. And then you can go down. Of course, it's also a matter of skills available. Okay, but probably with this question, we can fill the whole 1.5 hours. So I want to stop now. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Mas, you have some comments as well.
Yeah, I think actually Heinrich touched upon it, but I think one of the very exciting parts about the question is, do we even work with the right insects right now? Because I mean, the 8 approved species in Europe is, as I mentioned, just a very, very, very narrow part of what's available. And I think we still need a couple of species to fill in some of the niches in regard, as Heinrich also mentioned, the feed stuff, especially some species that are good at handling fibers. That would be awesome. And there are several insects that are very good at handling fibers as well. I think that could be exciting, but also from what we have right now, I'm a BSF guy, so I always advise go with black soldier fly, and I always say don't go with the common house fly. That's not something you want to get into.
Okay, so to summarize there, this is not a straightforward question. I think there's some key aspects to consider. One is, I think, definitely as well the substrate available, because substrate sources are significant, let's say, impacting your cost base and stuff like that. And then I think, at least for Europe, Heinrich, I don't know the outside Europe regulation. I think, of course, there is as well a frame of insects that are allowed. And to summarize, there's still a too small number of species that we can take into account. Maybe just a last one, Mats. There is one question coming from Sarah. Why not the common housefly?
I think there are many aspects. Why not? Mats, please.
So, quick one. Why not?
Sure. Because they are just annoying to work with. They are everywhere. They are fussy. They are annoying. They are disease vectors, and they are hard to work with just in general. I mean, their production cycle is amazingly effective and fast, but again, you don't get to see them grow very big. You have to do something all the time. There's so much handling, and again, handling them is just annoying. So yeah, I've been there. It was not fun. If you do black soldier fly farming, or I guess you could also with mealworm, and don't have your hygiene in order, you will also farm house flies.
Okay.
But it's not fun.
There's one question, I think, and this is one of the, I would even consider of the core, let's say, challenges of the insect industry. The question is coming from Janine. The industry challenge, scale, cost of production. Feedstock and aquaculture companies are interested in insect products, but want large volumes at low cost. Are we making progress to be more competitive versus soy meal, etc.? I think this is really one of the even one of the problem I'd like as well to focus on myself, is really how to produce insect proteins at a, let's say, a reasonable, I will not say competitive price, but at least at a reasonable price, so that, let's say, large players in the feed industry are interested to buy insects. So who wants to talk about? Heinrich.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, so also that's also my main question, and I had, yeah, it's actually really on the table, and yesterday I had a long discussion about this, and it's frequent. Okay, one thing is, which is good for us, the fish meal prices are rising, actually. So El Nino and so on, so they are going direction $2,000 per ton. So, and that's for us the benchmark. And then in Europe, especially, is the problem, the substrate prices. We have to go for lower value substrates, and then I think we reach this $2,000 threshold per ton for the insect meal, and that means that we have to approve, or the European Commission has to approve former foodstuffs. So the best, those which are over the best before date in the supermarket, including meat and fish. The major thing right now is to get out the meat and fish components, and that's not possible on the supermarket side. So you have expensive processes to separate the meat and fish components from the other, and that has to go together. And then the catering flux, so that it's the thing after the meal, from the canteens, from the hotels, from the hospitals. We need to have that, and then you get money for your substrate, and then we are on a good way to get profitable, and that's already the case outside of Europe. And so I learned, for example, in Vietnam, they are below actually the 2,000 euros, and then they go into the fish meal and the shrimps industry. However, they the fish industry and the aquaculture industry and shrimps industry in Vietnam are suffering other problems, so they even have to go to a even lower price. So it's also kind of moving target. So to summarize what I want to say, substrate prices have to go down, and that's in Europe 80% illegal thing. And then of course we have to go for economies of scale via lower energy cost and the automation. Okay, thanks.
Mas, some comments on your side as well?
Yeah, I agree with everything Heinrich said. I think it's very perceptive, but I would also like to add, I think the presumption that we have to compete with soy meal is wrong. And if we do that, it will not happen anytime. For decades, we cannot compete with soy meal, and we don't have to, because there's a huge market that needs to be filled in regards to protein that's not soy. You don't want to include too much soy in your fish feed, for example, or for small animals as well, and for pets and so on. So you don't have to compete with soy. If you have to compete with something, it might be fish meal and other kind of higher quality protein meals. But again, I think the mindset should be we need to fill out the market gaps instead of start competing with what's already there.
Arthur.
Yeah, maybe a quick additional comment to what Heinrich already said. So one major topic at the moment is really the costs for energy and heat, especially in Europe. This is a huge challenge. On one end, we are speaking of availability. So is it even possible to run a facility at a certain scale with the existing grid, with the existing heat sources? And on the other end, at the end of a month, if you look at your bill, is it actually worth it? So obviously you do this, you look at this before you start the business, and basically most of the business cases that we have seen or that we are seeing right now have the assumption that energy is extremely expensive and it's actually not stable at the moment. So therefore, I think in a few months it might look different, but right now it's really tough to get this estimation since substrate and energy cost, these are the driving factors. Obviously labor and machinery is also important, but it's really hard to kind of validate a business case if the assumptions for heat and electricity are not clear.
So I think this is a very extreme good input. I think as well the conclusion out of what has been said is maybe even a part of your decision where you locate your insect farm. Getting closer, let's say geographically, or even near to a substrate source, or near to energy sources in a sense of using waste heat or waste energy to produce your energy, to get your energy costs down, is a key factor of the decision. And before I jump to a next audience question, I'd like as well to raise maybe one question as well. So one side is the cost, the other side is the price you get. So for me, the next question would be, how do you find, if you decide to do an insect farm, how do you find your customers, and which are, let's say, from your point of view, the most interesting markets? Because I would say, and Heinrich, Mas, and all the participants, I think the fish and large scale markets. There's of course these are the highest volumes, but maybe these are the markets with the lowest prices you can achieve. So we are in early stages, at least in Europe. So there might be more interesting markets for insect products and proteins where you can get a higher price. But at the end, it's the business case that counts. So it's cost and revenues. So maybe the key question is how to approach the market and how should people proceed if they build an insect farm to get the right parameters in the business case. And we've done some calculation. Lucas can remember that as well. Costs we can easily calculate. We have really, let's say, tangible let's say factors, depreciations, cost for machinery, labor costs, and all that kind of thing. But let's say the guess variable who can make a business case positive or negative is the price you can get for your insect proteins. So for me, a question to the expert panel as well. One side is the cost, but how do you get to customers and to the pricing for your insect products? Who wants to answer? Lucas.
Yeah, I can maybe start with the mealworm this time. So they're basically the two most interesting markets is pet food right now and human food. And that's basically from the perspective of smaller operations. So we have right now here in Germany, not really a large scale mealworm farm. And so for the smaller operations, you can start with pet food and human food. But in pet food, there are two different markets which might be interesting. The market for the traditional pet food, for instance, reptile feed, or for birds, for instance, there you can, it's basically not a growing market, but there's enough space for small breeders, and there you can have really high prices for small quantities of your insects, of mealworms, for instance. The next interesting market is this for human, for pet food, for dogs, for instance, wet dog feed or also dry feed. There's also some interest in the market for smaller quantities of mealworms from our perspective. And another thing is the human food markets. Also, higher prices are you can get high prices for your insects, but there you have some additional hygiene you have to get through, and processing, of course. Nobody in the human food market buys living mealworms, for instance. So you have basically do some drying, blanching, maybe also other steps depending on your customer. So these are the three markets we actually focusing from the mealworm perspective.
Mas.
I just short wanted to also mention, don't forget that you also have product in your fraß that you could potentially get a little bit of earning from, whether it be in a cooperation with a local grow house, or it could be selling in bags in farmers markets or whatnot, but that's also a potential source of income.
So it's Kipfer.
Yeah, thank you. I think, about the black switch fly part for the marketing, I think it's Matt is good about the fraß. Yeah, I think fraß nowadays is a very people ignoring part. Basically, when you do a mass balance, you figure out, wow, the fraß actually is your main output based on the weight. Yeah, yeah. And when you do your finance calculation, when you put 80 euros per ton, 100 euros per ton, this varies a lot. And then, as far as I know, I heard from some farmers in the South Asia, basically now the fraß is more than 50% of their revenue. Yeah, so it's pretty high nowadays. Yeah, for the fraß. So people nowadays they say for black switch fly male, but I think also the same time should focus on the marketing for their fraß. And about fraß, another benefit is the carbon credit. If you really do a life cycle assessment of your three products, meal, oil, and fraß, in the end you figure out your fraß have very low carbon emissions when you compare to artificial. It's called artificial fertilizer. I think per ton is way more higher greenhouse gas emission, or we call it carbon emissions. Yeah, I think around 8 times or 7 times higher. So fraß is really good marketing or sales products to get more revenue. Yeah.
Heinrich. Heinrich, you're muted.
Sorry. So fraß is a special topic. Unfortunately, in Europe, we have strict legislation. You have to homogenize it at 70 degrees 1 hour, and then you have to make sure that not more than 5 volume percent of insect is there, or 3% of weight, and then that makes a lot of trouble. We from the IPIF, we want to get rid of that and want to go forward. We had to accept this legislation because we have now a level playing field in Europe. Before it was a disaster to go with frass from one to the other, and also the downside is if you homogenize with 70 degrees, there is a loss of some properties because you kill the positive bacteria which strong in the roots and so on. So yeah. And Kiefer, sorry to correct you a little bit, but yesterday I had a long discussion with Vietnam. They would pay this amount, but however, the customers want the proof that the frass is so good, and so it's right now it's a theoretical price. And the downside is you need 3 to 5 years until you have an effect. For example, at the palm oil industry, and you bring out there the frass for a fertilizer or as a replacement for soil, what they have, then you don't see the effects right away. And then therefore, why should I pay 100 or 150 euros if I get that thing? This is a kind of a deadlock. We have to get out and prove that it's really working, and we need some scientific proof, and then the customers would be there. There I agree, but right now it's more theoretical price. Yeah. So this is one, and the other thing to the meal, our major product or major product. In BASF we have too small quantities. We need. I always hear, please provide me quantities, provide me quantities, and then the price coming into the place. Maybe we need to have somehow a portal or somehow a central organization bringing together a lot of smaller producers, and then we have a kind of an amount, and then we can go to feed mills, and then it's interesting for them. One question is always, what is the security that you supply me, especially in pet food? Pet food, the name, the branding is there, and a supplier or a pet food manufacturer does not rely on one supplier. And so, because if you cannot supply and you cannot go to the shops and people cannot buy the product, and the marketing was already there and the money is spent, and then the brand is dead, and that's a too high risk for this pet food manufacturer. So I think the industry has to grow, and we have to somehow build networks, portals, and bring things together, and then go professionally to the market. So that's my lead somehow.
Heinrich, I have one more question related to that. One is the quantity. You know, larger players want to have larger quantities, so in a constant way. But the other question is quality standards. Can you, because I think one is quantity, but if you know, if the quality is varying by each farm, then you cannot bundle those to deliver that. Maybe a short response to that. Where are we, especially in Europe, to establish certain quality standards? And you know, Lucas mentioned as well, and there is a different quality standards for human food than for animal feeds. So is there already something in place? Or at least to be discussed, how can you, let's say, ensure a certain, let's say, quality categories so to deliver?
Okay, yeah, that's the most important question. If we have a portal and 10 different suppliers, I have to be sure that the quality is in a certain range. Of course, we have a natural product, and then maybe the amino acid content varies between 60 and 65, but we should then know that. So amino acid profile, of course, very important. The fat content of the black soldier fly, I would say not more than 7% of rest fat in it, also because of the storage time you have. But we have to define that. A baseline is set by IPIF. I recommend the good hygiene practice. This guideline, it's available on the IPIF website. But if we get together such a portal or such a network, we have to define very strict quality rules and stick to them.
Okay, Mas, quick one, and then I'd like to jump to the audience questions because we've got some more audience questions.
I just wanted to add in regards to ensuring quality. It's if you do have a lot of people that delivers in, obviously it will vary a lot, but that's fine. That's not necessarily an issue because you should know what every people are delivering. There should be an analysis, and then you make sure they might get paid if they have less protein or more water. They might get paid a little bit less for their product, but in the end, it will all be mixed to meet a certain composition. So you will have maybe products from 10 different farmers. You can always find a mix that ensures you deliver exactly the product that you have promised to deliver.
Okay.
Heinrich, you have some more comment? Your hand is still up, so.
Oh, no, sorry.
Okay. So now let's talk again for a further question from Yannick in the audience. Do you see larger potential for dry processing or wet processing in terms of BASF farming? I think that's a good one for Arthur.
Yeah. I was actually thinking whether I should raise the hand or whether the question will be addressed directly. Yeah. There's also a very, very common question, and actually the answer is also not that easy. It really depends on the scale that we are talking about. So since we are in the market for a while, we also have some internal numbers just to compare how many farms are there, how many farms are using wet, how many farms are using dry. So therefore, what we see on the market is that especially pilots, small scale, mid scale, but even some big scale farms are using dry rendering, since the technology behind that it's pretty straightforward. Cost wise, there is a break even where we consider the wet rendering to be more efficient, but that scale it's relatively big. So there are some farms that might be able to produce that amount, but the logistics behind that, everything that comes before in terms of reproduction, in terms of rearing, this is really challenging. So therefore, what we see is that also in terms of or thinking through the possibility of decentralizing, we think that the dry process might make sense if you have the drying locally where you rear the insects and you do the defatting at a central place. Thinking that through the wet process is a bit more challenging, since there are some bottom costs for the entire equipment, so you cannot scale that down to a certain point. So therefore, we think if everything is in-house, it's big scale, then wet processing, that's a good way forward. If we think of decentralized plants, and this might be something where we can really grow the industry. Due to more potential players entering the market, then dry process might be more suitable.
Just a little comment. We had a webinar, webinar number 3 on the processing, where 2 players have been presenting, Reinhardt for dry processing and Gea for wet processing. And the basic message was as well, wet processing more suitable for large scale industrial farms, while dry processing. This is the storyline, but I think, of course, in detail, you need to take a look at that, which is the most interesting piece. Next question, that's coming from Sarah. How is it looking with getting ecological certification for insects in Europe? I think it's again a question for Heinrich.
Yeah, we are in the process and discussion with the European Commission about this very important question, because we hope we get a premium if our products are certified organic or ecological. My position is all products coming out from us is organic, is ecological, because we just do a natural process. We don't add any antibiotics or other things, and so it is supposed to be organic. However, that's too extreme. We won't get that through. Right now, the discussion is you need to use organic substrates, but the availability of organic substrates is not that big. That's a big issue. So we somehow have to go between using only organic substrates and having the whole process certified as organic. This discussion is going back and forth. I can assure you from IPIF, we try to push hard, but the European Commission is, as always, a bit slow. However, we will make it to our in November. We have our next event with IPIF in Brussels, also get together with European Commission, and there we hope we can make the next step to get the parameters for the organic certification.
Mas.
I think it would be nice if we could call the insects organic. I do agree it should not be depending on all the substrate being organic necessarily as well, but more than anything else, I think it's not necessary. I don't see the reason why they should be organic. Organic is what is organic. It's whatever somebody have defined it to be. It might not even be sustainable to do organic. I think doing black soldier fly should be about sustainability. We should have other means to document that and show that, and that I think that would be preferable. But obviously, it would be nice to have some label we could put on to get a higher price. That would be nice, but it would also be nice if the production was subsidized from the EU or something like that. There's lots of different ways that could happen.
Okay. Next question, but before I jump to the next question, there have been some people joining after the opening of the webinar, so I'd just like to restate. If you have questions, we use the chat functions to raise your questions, so I encourage you to raise your key questions in the chat functions so we can answer them. The next question is actually coming from Janine, and she as well mentioned that we have discussed that. And if I remember right, it was even Heinrich giving the answer, is about animal manure as a substrate. Is research being done on this area? E.g., can black soldier fly fat on manure be processed, e.g., oil protein fractioning, to reduce any perceived risk? What end-use application might be acceptable for black soldier fly raised on manure?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I would like to raise insects on manure, even better one than black soldier fly. There are some which are very suitable. However, we are still in the farmed animal discussion, and if you don't get out of this and have a special category for insects in the European Union, we won't get forward with this. Probably you know there are only 5 different species of animals in European Union. These are zoo animals, wild animals, the minks. How is the English word for the minks? Where they belong to in Denmark there was a big mink in the industry. Then of course the pets and the farmed animals. So these are the 5, and we need a 6th category, and then we can start and then we can separate the upstream and the downstream, and say downstream, okay, there are certain prerequisites in upstream what you feed to your animals, and then you go downstream to human food, to pet food, to farmed animal food, or animal food as well, pet food, and farmed animal food maybe again somehow separate. And then a third portion or fourth portion, technical products, where we can make foils out of the protein or lubricants out of the oil, and so on in downstream. However, if you don't get out of this farmed animal discussion in the upstream, we won't make it. Outside Europe, I know from some approaches, especially in Africa, where even human faces are used to feed black soldier fly, and it works very well, and they are fed the black soldier to pigs then afterwards since 5 years, and nothing happened, because that's normal in nature. We have that already in also in Germany. The free range chicken, they are running around the field. What they eat, they shall eat the larvae of flies, and the flies they feed before on the manure on the meadow. So yeah, however, in controlled environment, it's forbidden, and you get punished very hard if you do that. Yeah, European Commission, EFSA, European Food Safety Authority, they are not able to release former foodstuff with meat and fish and catering flags. So I think manure is 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road, if there is not too much pressure from outside Europe. However, that would help a lot. And yeah, again, the major question is we need a 6th category in Europe for insects, and then have a dedicated legislation for it. But yeah, long way to go.
Okay, another question on black soldier fly coming from Yannick. What goals do you recommend for selective breeding of black soldier fly? So maybe I give the word to Kiefer, Mats. So Heinrich, you of course always can answer those questions, but I would like to give some more airtime. And maybe Lucas, also you're on mealworm. I think from a breeding perspective, I think in general, there are some aspects and maybe some areas you need to focus on. So if you can provide some answers, it would be really great. Who wants to start? Lucas, some comments on your side?
Yeah, from the mealworm perspective, yeah, I think it's a quite difficult question. So you can always focus on the life cycle time, so that they are developing more faster than normal, or for the size of the mealworms. We have some customers, they love to get the big mealworms. So, but from the biological perspective, is always really difficult. So for our small scale operation, we are not that. At the moment, we are not focusing that deeply about selective breeding, because the first thing is get the environment in your farm really attached to the biology of your mealworms, and get that running. And the next step might be some small optimizations, but there is some science behind that. I think they selected for 7 years bigger sized pupae in the mealworm farming process. And the experiments showed that in the overall output of this experiment, there was no really gain in comparing the bigger sized pupae to the normal sized pupae groups, because you have always some downsides if you select for one specific trait in genetic breeding. So if you select for the size, maybe they are developing slower, or there are other downsides which might also influence your overall performance. So it's quite difficult to go for selective breeding from my perspective, but it might be the future. And then you can also select for different traits all at once. But these are really big selective breeding programs you have to run. And so from my side, for the smaller operations and for the phase we are right now in, I think it's not that much in focus right now, but it might be for the future. Maybe it's another topic for BASF, because there are more large-scale operations. I don't know what's the actual stand there.
Thanks, Lucas. Kiefer.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. About selection breeding, I always like this kind of topic. I also doubting is really effective on the selection. I read some paper about certain company to select always the biggest larvae during the rearing time to pick it up, and then trying to keep the colony and lay eggs. And then one day I was asking, if you really want to select, let's say select a black suited fly, or you want to select flies or larvae or eggs. Yeah. So people always wonder, I want the fast grow, biggest larvae, but that also means this larvae gonna become flies always the faster and the most aggressive in the mating. That also means their eggs are most high quality one. So one moment we ask, why not select on eggs? And then the follow question is, when do you gonna select on the eggs? Yeah. Which moments? Some people say there's a time window. You can select the most high quality fertile eggs from the black suited fly flies. So keep less for the colony. I think that's a good way to go. If you really select the larvae, then there's lots of labor because you always pick up. Yeah, so it's a lot of labor intensive. I think now maybe selection on other sides. Let's say we focus on the eggs. Maybe it's a good way to do. Yeah, yeah. That's my perspective. Yeah.
Okay, Mas.
Yes, so I've actually worked quite a lot on this topic, and one thing I always say, don't do it. The market, the industry is not ready yet. In the E times G mantra, we don't know the full extent of E yet. So how can we manipulate G when we don't know E? Do that first. Get your environment down to the details, learn that stuff first, improve your feed, improve your environment, improve your methods, do that first. And then you can maybe in the future think about breeding. But when it comes to doing breeding, again, I think a bit like Kiefer mentions, just going for size, that's not what you should aim for. I will say the most important one is go for feed conversion rate. That is what will save you money and give you improved. The other one is like breeding. You might want to select something that aims for breeding, and size is not equal better breeding. You want fitness. And so what is a fit larvae? Again, that's hard to say, but that's definitely what you want to go for. And the last thing I want to mention in this regard is, so what we've seen from other industries is that while all the breeding has been going on with cows and chickens, and what they have suffered for is bad health. So they need antibiotics and so on and so on. If we are not to make the same mistakes again, keep that in mind as well. Keep that a focus. Make sure they are resilient, and I don't know how you should do that, but definitely that should also be one of your goals. But again, don't do breeding.
Okay. Thank you very much. Last say from Heinrich.
Yeah, I agree to everything what speakers before say, and I only want to add a wish. I want to improve the amino acid profile of the black soldier fly. We are low in methionine, and that's always, let's say, a problem, especially in chicken feeding. If somebody is really good in genetics and so on, please go ahead and improve the methionine content. Then that will help a lot. So.
Right. Okay. There is. Oh, Lucas, you want? Oh, Heinrich, did you have still raised your hand? Lucas, no, it's fine.
Lucas. Yeah.
Lucas,
sorry,
you're muted.
I cannot. Yeah.
No, that's fine, Heinrich. That's fine. Lucas, you have been muted, so we didn't hear you.
Okay. Sorry. One last thing I want to mention is maybe also be careful that your breeding process or your production process isn't a selective breeding from itself, because sometimes you unintentionally select for larvae, because maybe in the harvesting process you harvest bigger larvae for breeding, or something like that. So you have also keep in mind that maybe your own production process is some kind of selection for one group of your insects, and maybe your population isn't as diverse as before it when you started.
Yeah, thank you. Great hint. We still need more questions, but I have maybe one question coming from myself. Again, related to a business case as well and costs. This is, if you look at traditional farming, normally we have, let's say, specialized companies doing actually the reproduction. So a pig farmer is buying piglets and things like that. And we see that evolving as well in the insect industry. And that touches, by the way, as well, things like, ensuring genetic, let's say, variability instead of, always rebreeding and incesting your own population. So how do you see the aspect using specialized providers for neonates or eggs versus doing it yourself? From an economical aspect, I would assume that's more expensive, but maybe it's not true because you have higher quality whatsoever. So, Lukas, if you want to comment.
Yes, from a mealworm perspective, and I think it's also how the whole insect industry develops. This specialization is, I think, one of the next steps to come. And in mealworm, for instance, it might really be useful when we have breeders which sell you eggs or small neonates, and then fed the for the fattening process, other specialized farms, and then for the processing, another supply. But that's not the actual state of the art. So in the mealworm business, but we are definitely going in this direction. So for instance, at Seprico, we developed machinery for harvesting mealworm eggs because we have some breeders right now, they sell neonates, but it's a big issue with the space. You have to use a big space. I think they are sold in the substrate in the boxes. And there have to be some technologies, for instance, separating eggs from the substrate. That's more in the mealworm business. I think in black soldier flies, the flies lay their eggs in your spaces where you want, and you can maybe sell the eggs easier. But the way to go in the mealworm business, I think, also in the black soldier fly business. Yeah.
Heinrich.
Yeah. Of course, it's now a little bit of commercial because we do that. We sell the neonates, we sell the suspended neonates together with Freeze M, the Israeli company, and I saw Yuval also on the list here as a representative. So what we can do now, and I think that's the major advancement, we can suspend the neonates and keep them for 14 days in the same stage and have a survival rate of 90%. And that will help to separate the industry. And I think the specialization has to take place. And we make good progress in that. And really, it's not years ago we sold eggs, but then it was always the problem is the hatching rate. We are very good in hatching at our place, and Kifa, we had problems. You supplied your eggs, and you complained because not enough did hatch and so on. So the specialists have to do that. It's it's the most complicated portion in terms of biology in the area, and if you focus on the rearing, on the fattening, that makes more sense. And two other aspects I have in that. First, you save a lot of capex if you don't go for rearing, and second, you always if you go for the reproduction cycle, you always have to have overproduction. Yeah, the capex intensive part is the fattening, and you always have to make sure that you have enough neonates and enough 5-day-olds to fill your fattening, your rearing thing, and therefore you have the overproduction. Also, you can then think about you reduce your capex for the the neonate production to 50%, and then add with this suspended neonates, because you can get a pellet and put them on in a storage, and then supply your fattening out of there, and then you can fluctuate between 50 and 70% and so on, and then fill the rest. So this is, yeah, okay. Now this was the 5-minute commercial from Hamid Barut and Freeze. So yeah, we will be happy to supply the suspended neonates to the industry. Thanks.
Okay, Arthur.
Yeah, so I think we can look at this from two perspectives. One perspective would be, say, a short-term view on it. So in the short term, I think there are still many plants or farms that are doing the reproduction in-house, since they were forced to do it and they gained some experience, and now for them, cost-wise, it's not that attractive to jump into constellation where the reproduction is supplied from outside. On the other end, if we look at this, let's say cost-wise, then there is a certain price tag for the meal, for the fat, for the frass, and if we calculate that backwards to see, okay, what are the maximum costs that can be somehow implemented for the reproduction, then we have to see that I think cost-wise, something still has to move, since we have things like electricity costs, like substrate costs, plus reproduction costs. So here the total look at the business cases necessary. On the other hand, if we look at it at long term and we look for decentralized applications, we look at a big market where former pig farmers or poultry farmers are moving into the sector, other players that would like to do some waste recycling management, whatever, then it's absolutely necessary, since building up this expertise, investing in this doesn't make any sense at all. So in the short term, I think the costs need to go down. In the long term, I think there is no way around that, and hopefully we will get to that quick.
Thank you, Arthur. Mas, one more comment.
Yes, and I do agree with what Ben said. I also think that especially in the long term, we will see these decentralized production and reproduction units. It makes a lot of sense. But for the next 5 to 10 years, I would definitely not advise to go that route yet, because there's simply not enough producers of this. So you will be fully reliant on one source of your breeding material, and that's not well, that can be hard if they aren't able to deliver. But on another note, I think it's a good opportunity to do more collaboration in the industry, because I have tried an ento-mass. Our reproduction failed us, and we had to get enough eggs to start 10 ton of larvae, and that just sucks. But luckily, we are fairly close to a norm. So I just grabbed the phone and called them, hey, do you have any excess eggs? And surely they helped us out, and that was awesome. So I would advise, if you are starting to produce and have to meet demands, there's a solution like freeze them. And I have worked with the possum, and it's awesome. It really works well. That can be a backup, but ensure you have some sort of backup. That's my advice. So it can be from a decentralized reproduction facility, or it can be from your next door producer.
Okay, so thank you, Mas. There's one more question coming up from Yannick. Do you see interest of pharma industry towards specific products of insects? If yes, which products? No. Heinrich, you're muted.
Yeah, Yannick, to be honest, right now, there is very little demand from pharmaceuticals. There are some scientific things are going on, especially in Gießen, concerning AMPs, antimicrobial peptides. However, the success by now in KU Leuven is doing something in Belgium. Success is limited. Yeah, it's a little bit better in the cosmetic industry for some products, but also not that what I expect or I hoped for. We are some patents are published recently from Henkel and Daliwerke and also BASF as well in terms of washing powder, in terms of biosurfactants. However, in that area, we need much more volume. There we need really huge volumes before we can go in that market. But pharmaceuticals, actually, as far as I know, I don't know everything, but what I know, very low demand and very low interest.
Mars again.
Yes.
Thank you, Heinrich.
I believe so. From what I've seen, read, and heard, the most exciting product that could come out is chitosan. That's made from the chitin in the insect, and I think there's a potential in this. From what I've understood, it's easier to extract the chitin and make the chitosan when you use insect as a source, and it could potentially be something you could utilize your empty pupae shells and dead flies for, though you do need to have a huge production to get any substantial amounts of that. But I would definitely look into that if I were to do any sort of pharma.
Okay, next question coming from Sarah. What could the scientific community do to help the insect industry? Mas, you have been on both sides.
Prove that insects cannot carry TSE, mad cow disease. Prove that would help a lot.
Heinrich.
Yeah. And when I'm with the European Commission, always at the end of all talks, there is we need more research. We don't know enough. So I agree with Mats. This is one of the major questions, whether the brains go through the stomach of the insects or not, and so on. However, there are a lot of other things. The questions, food conversion rate, new insects, methionine, feeding trials, and so on. Go ahead, and do research. Anything is appreciated, really.
Okay, next question. I see the oil is mostly used for animal feed. Would this be something that could be used in cosmetics and in the future? I'm sure, yes, it's already done, but you can maybe provide some more details, Mars, please.
So the oil should more or less be able to substitute palm kernel oil everywhere it's used, and it is used everywhere. So in feedstuff, cosmetics, and textile, and so on. So I think there's plenty of application for the insect oil.
Thank you, Heinrich.
And I want to add the lubricants as well, especially in environments where you cannot use mineral oil when water, drinking water, and so is applied. I'm in 2 projects which is trying to use the oil as lubricant.
Okie doke. So again, please keep on asking questions. I suggest that we have roughly 25 minutes left in the webinar. Let's move on maybe on the topic of, let's say, how to launch an insect farm, an insect project, how to approach, what is the best way to do it. So I think the key question is, and that came up as well, how do you start? Do you start more, I would say, in a waterfall approach, doing a small pilot farm, then gain experience, then do a larger farm? Or is it better to look out for investors and go directly for mid-sized farms and get in, let's say, key expertise from larger players in the industry, like companies who are consulting in this area, and build right from the scratch a larger farm? Is there any comment, any suggestion from your side? I think two things on how to approach it, and secondly, which mistakes to avoid. I think this is as well a very interesting question. So anybody of you, and maybe I give the first word at that time to Arthur to start off. He has done some of the projects, and then keep it on to the expert panel to continue commenting on that.
Okay, sure. Well, I think we just have to look at the history of the insect industry, and have to look at the history of the companies, small, middle, big scale companies that are around. So since now there was no major player that actually started from 0 to 100% with a huge investment and was building a big scale farm. It was always a process. So since we are speaking of a certain investment, it's still venture capital that has to be spent here for the bigger installation. So there is some uncertainty there. There is a certain risk, and how do you address the risk? You address it if you prove your assumptions, and this can be mainly done by having your smaller scale operation in place, even though there will be no bigger so to say inventions. So we know how to rear the insects. We know more or less how it works with the substrate, how to treat the air, how to do everything that is needed to have it up and running. But it's something that you need to prove to yourself, that you need to prove to your investors, maybe your neighbors, maybe your family, whatever. So there is definitely a way or a path that you have to go through before jumping into big scale. The question is, how much money do you spend until that point to gain that confidence for yourself, to gain that confidence for your stakeholders? And then it might make sense to either jump into really big scale, or to find the break even for your individual case, since it is very unique. So it depends on where you're located, what are the climate conditions, what substrates are available, what kind of utilities are there. So the break even for everyone is quite different. So therefore, I suggest start small, gain know-how, some hands-on experience, evaluate your break even, ask the right players to help you in this case. Again, risk management, you reduce that if you approve your assumptions. Then break even, mid-scale, perhaps you multiply it, perhaps you go even bigger scale. So that might be a healthy way forward, at least from my point of view.
Okay, maybe Mas, you want to comment on that?
Yes, please. So I've done this myself, started from scratch. I've helped several companies do it as well. I've helped both small entrepreneurs, and I've helped huge companies deciding whether they want to get into this or not. And what I always start with tell them, you can either spend time or you can spend money, because you will have to do one or both, most likely both, to get anywhere. Or you can just blindly trust that one of the big key turn providers can deliver everything. But yeah, not to step on anybody's toes, but I would not do that myself. So I would usually recommend that if you know nothing, you do need to ally yourself with somebody who knows something. It could be me, for example. Self-promotion here. And then you need to figure out what are the steps you need to take to get for example, your pilot done, if you want to do that. And because if you're just walking around blind in the dark, it can easily be 3-4 years, maybe even 5, before you have a decent pilot where you believe in the KPIs you've achieved and you're ready to scale up and really go for big scale operations. I believe this can be achieved in 1 year if you are efficient, but it will take some investments as well, because you will need to have somebody who can help you do feed tests and and help you evaluate your available resources and help you navigate the market of suppliers.
Thank you, Mas. I think I'd like to maybe dig down a bit deeper. If let's say that the ground tone of the discussion is saying you better, if you're not already very deep in the industry, you better start with a certain size and then start growing. So let's say an initial step of a decent sized farm on an annual output is maybe something, I don't, please correct me, something around 1,000 to 4,000 tons a year, which is already quite big. I don't know, Mas, your farm, your output was around how much?
So we did roughly 500 ton a
500.
year.
So let's say 500,000 to build up. Let's say if you today decide to start an insect farm and you had for 500 to 1,000 tons a year, let's say black soldier, how much time would you and money would you allocate to get from today, if you take the decision, until you have, let's say, a stable farm with a stable output running, and how much money is involved? Just to give, and we talk Europe because, of course, costs in Asia or in Africa or wherever in the world might be different. So maybe it would be as well to give the people some gut feeling in a sense of, time and cost. And maybe as the last step to get a break even, this is another one, until you actually make money out of the farm. I think let's have a short commercial discussion on that. And maybe, Lucas, you may comment as well, because you are going down the route as well. You are running the pilot farm now. You have plans to have an industrial farm in the near future. So maybe, whoever can comment, and Lucas, maybe you can start and provide some insights, to get some reality into that, because everybody has to go, even if you're experts already in certain areas, through a learning curve. What are realistic timeframes, let's say, from a step today, taking the decision until having, let's say, a decent pilot farm running, and then the next step until having, let's say, a larger industrial farm running, where other, let's say, things kick in, like getting permissions from your city to build that, finding the ground, construction, and all that type of stuff. Yeah, Lucas, do you want to start?
Yes, of course I can start.
Yeah.
So, but I can get a really answer to that. So maybe a bit about my background. I started 2017 with some small boxes in some private environment, and started to get some first experience. And then we had some federal fundings and stuff. But you need to find investors, of course, and that's the first point. You have to convince somebody to give some amount of money, and that's also really hard. And then I think what we are going for is to get some kind of validation pilot farm where we can show that these environment for the insects will work also in a larger scale. And that's right now the scale for the validation pilot farm we are focusing on is some kind of 2 tons per month. So it's still a small scale operation. And then our plans, and maybe that's in the next 3 years to come, we want to scale that to around 1,000 to 2,000 tons per year. So it's around 20 to 40 tons per month, I think, or per week. And I think it's quite difficult. Maybe when we look at the pilot farm, it's around maybe a few €100,000 are invested in the pilot farm to get the technology working. You make many mistakes in this process, of course. You have to fix, and you have a big learn curve. And but from the time management, I can say maybe around when you start now in the mealworm business, at least 5 years to get to a point where you reach a size that may be near break-even point. But that's only a gut feel. So I have to experience this for myself. So maybe 5 years. I would say.
Thank you, Lucas. I think, and I know the story quite well because I've been closely involved to a certain point. And this is what we see very often, and then I will head on to Kiefer, but what we see very often, that people start a farm, either finding an investor, or if the people are already deep in their professional career and they have some money in the pocket, they usually start a pilot farm with their own money, as a proof of concept, if you put it this way. And then if they show tractions, they look for an investor. And maybe just taking this, I have been speaking in the last webinar about that. You will not find an investor if you don't have a certain track record. You know, if you, as a, let's say, no name, come around, have never done insect farming, and then look for an investor who's giving you, I don't know, X hundred thousands even. I'm not talking, let's say, they have different investor levels. So for the pilot farm, you may get along to find a business angel or somebody in the family or in the closer network to invest in your company. That's the way. But then if you're looking for a larger money to build a larger farm, and then we are talking, let's say, millions of euros. And Lucas, I know roughly the figure we assumed at the time when we did the planning. So this is not just 1 million, it's a couple of million of euros to get really started. And I strongly recommend, again, here, it's not just money, so you need to show some track record. You as a founder or a founder team, you need to have the right skills in the team. So you need to have somebody who has a real good understanding about insects and the insect industry. You need to have somebody in the team who is good in projects and good in maybe financials and operations. And then you need somebody in engineering, because an insect farm, as Lucas as well mentioned, and Arthur, at a certain size, you know, automation is a key. And so you're talking about machinery and engineering. So that's really important. And I think if you go down the steps, then, you know, you talk about an initial investment, a couple of 100,000 euros. That can be done by a business angel and things like that. But then if you look for larger investors, you need to be ready, and you need to actually have as well a skill set in your team who can deal with investors. You know, it's not like you ring up the guy and say, "Hi, I'm Bernd, and listen, I want to have 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 4 millions, or even more." They will not say hooray, but you know, they will say, "Thank you, interesting, bye." Yeah. So I think it's important. That's what I said. The two key aspects are the founder team. So you as person have the right skill set and show management skills. You know, if you're a good biologist, it's not necessarily that a good manager, but you know, an investor will always invest in the team, and secondly in the business idea. So that's, I think, a key aspect to keep in mind. Kiefer, your turn.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I just quite shocked by Lucas mentioned the 5 years long from scale to the commercial way. That's quite long, yeah, because I think that's during the 5 years, basically you have negative cash flow, yeah, and then you pay back. Let's say you turn to break even. That takes more years to get more, yeah, to have a positive call that is called a net income, yeah. From things before, I also work for a startup for Black Sweet Fly project. But in the end, I think the 3 part is very important: finance, and how a good relationship with the bank. Yeah. Second is about feed. Can you get it for free, or can you even get it for paid? Yeah. And the third is about your sales. Can you access the market? Yeah. So now even I see startup, I access like kind of evaluation. Can you have one of or even 2 of 3? Yeah, if you have 1 or two of them, I think you are really good to go. Yeah. About from scale, let's say if you want to do a pilot, now the people think about a scale up. I'm thinking about scale down at the current moment to save the cost. Yeah. So, but you still need a representative pilot. Let's say your software test should be climate controlled, so to mimic the future how the commercial look like. and also pilots should be representative enough, for example, logistic, etc., to train your employees. Yeah, and then when you validate your substrate, you do a good finance calculation. You think this is good to go, then we just basically almost the same time after you validate this data, you should immediately start the commercial way. Yeah, you're trying to shrink the gap between pilot and the commercial. Otherwise, it takes 3 or 5 years. That's gonna that's break even gonna be crazy. Maybe more than 10 years. The bank said no. And also we had a trouble with bank is that, for example, the founder want to use the machinery, the system, this kind of machinery is maybe how to call it. It's called a remortgage. Like it's kind of like I have a house, but this house is funded by the bank. But the bank at that time was doubting why I should funding this this equipment or this plastic crate. Maybe in the future they worth like 0 value. So the bank doesn't want to invest, and then the investor is always looking at the bank. If bank give the money, we give the money. So always the trouble in between. Yeah, I think that's currently my suggestion. Focus on 3 parts: finance, feed, and the market to evaluate yourself, and then decide to go. Yeah.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Kiefer.
yeah.
That reflects very much. And before I head to Mas, we have already quite some examples for people, let's say, started the commercial part far too late. So they got money, they invested, they developed technology, blah, 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 paid rents. So the burn rate was already, let's say, at a certain size, and the commercial side just didn't kick off. And my experience, I've been selling larger projects. I've been doing all that. Sometimes, if you approach a customer, actually until, you have to approach maybe 100 customers, you will get maybe 5 deals out of it, and it may take 1 year. So you need to start very early on the commercial side as well to get that done. And I think one aspect, Kiefer, you mentioned as well, I think you always will need to have one lead investor, to get the others to follow. If you don't have the lead investor, it's really hard. Yeah. Either you yourself, your lead investor, we have somebody in some examples in Germany where people have, of course, 500,000 of money and invest in the pilot farm. Then you can do it, and the pilot farm is proficient. Then you can find investors. But normally you need to have, this is the typical game. You need to have one lead investor to believe in you. And maybe one last word on the investors. And this is, I think, the approach Lucas has been taking, which is very good, is taking investors who bring in more than money. Bring in either, and Lucas, and I think I can mention it, having an investor who is actually in the animal feed industry already established, who has a distribution network and things like that. That helps a lot. Yeah. Or you have an investor who is in some other, in either in machinery, tooling, or in substrates or whatsoever, who has maybe a vital interest and a good substrate source, which he wants to invest in an insect farm. So you can do a joint venture. So it's not just looking for money. This is what I want to bring across. If you look for investors who have relationships, who have maybe somewhere in the value stream of the industry, who can help you. Mats, your talk then.
Yeah, and I see we don't have that long, so I'll try to keep it short. There's one thing that have to be said. If you are about to be an insect producer in Europe, it's a hard place to start right now. It's not easy, and I would not necessarily recommend it unless you either have your input or you have some sort of wonderful new technology you can use to revolutionize the insect industry. But you need one of these things first. And if you are serious about it, if you have, for example, a good source of input, rearing insect is not that hard. You can easily get people to train you, figure it out. It's not that hard. It's way harder to get the whole business perspective right, especially the input. So do you have an available source? You can get that evaluated. What can that provide without starting a pilot production, without getting too large investments and starting producing tons and tons of larvae? You can get that evaluated. A lot of companies can do that for you now. Do that. before you start venturing into producing insects. And this is obviously not meant for people who want to do a farmer who want to have an integrated production on their farm. That's something entirely else. But in the industrial sense, I would not venture into doing either pilots or productions before having my concept kind of validated and my business case kind of validated.
Thank you very much. Arthur, is Heinrich gone? I don't see him anymore on the...
Just the camera's off.
Oh, that camera is off. Okay.
I had to snooze, therefore
Okay, so we are heading to the end. I think there is one more question. Maybe we can have a quick one from Yannick again. Which application field and crop do you recommend for the insect frass? Mats
was faster.
It looks like the game where people need to hit the buzzer, you know, who has the first. Okay.
Growing houses. I think there's an amazing potential in growing houses, both flowers and vegetables. But otherwise, I know from the literature that I think it's these types of grass, maybe alfalfa grass or something like that. There's amazing results in all trials where it's been used on grass.
Yeah. No, I agree. So vegetables and flowers, we had very good results with flowers together with Humboldt University, but it's a matter of application. I think it's suitable everywhere where you need good soil and so on. However, in greenhouses they pay the most for it, so that's probably from this side. Okay.
Kifa, last word.
Yeah, specific crops. Once we was talking with the US customer, they get a lot of money from selling frass to grow wheat. Yeah, so wheat is
maybe a future market in Europe as well. You know, at least in Germany, there's some discussions. I know Switzerland is a bit more relaxed, and Netherlands anyway. So, yeah.
The wheat growers, they pay a lot of money for the frass. Yeah. But nowadays in Europe, I think go to biodigester is also a way. For produce biogas. Yeah.
But I have to warn, cannabis market is overestimated. It's everybody gets dollar signs in the eyes when you talk about cannabis, but then if you come down to reality, it's a different story.
So it's time. We are at 11:30, so punctual landing. First of all, many thanks to the contributors, to our speakers who have been helping us to make this successful. We appreciated that very much, and we are looking forward to work with you in the near future. Thank you as well for the participants who registered. So please spread the words to join the network. We, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are registering, recording this webinar, so the webinar will be available on the website, so you can rewatch it or send the link to friends and other people interested in the insect industry so they can watch it. Maybe some final words on our own, let's say, needs and purposes. ento-connect, we are now heading, Arthur, we need to find a way to celebrate our first year. So, Heinrich, you're muted.
Yeah. Thanks again. I had to. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much for having me here and inviting me. I was at the first round and now at the last, so I have the whole umbrella. Thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate any support for the insect industry. With our biological pest control, we had last year 30-year anniversary. So I'm living for a long time from insects. So, and I appreciate any help, and please spread the word. And I hope then for the next series of ento-connect, we will get again a lot of participants. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. No, overall, maybe just to let everybody know, we had about 1,000 registrations on the webinar, which is a great success. Maybe next step, now everybody is some kind of taking a breath. Summer holidays are over here in Europe, so I myself will be heading on to holiday. What we want to do, and maybe to mention that currently, as we said, the website is up and running now for almost half a year. We are looking for what I call ambassadors, so people like our speakers or people who are participating in the webinar who want to be, let's say, I say an ambassador, being in the closer circle with us, where we have a, let's say, a group of people, something around whatever, 10, 20, 25 people, whom we work closely together as a group in a sense of developing future, let's say content, and as well, of course, using them, as well regionally, so that we have people in the US, we have people in Canada, in South America, or in Asia, or in Africa, or in Middle East and Pacific, whatever, who can, let's say, act as, let's say, multiplicator and an ambassador for ento-connect and the insect industry. And of course, the goal as well on our side, and that's I will be definitely talking as well to Mas, to Kiefer, to Bob, Heinrich, and Lukas, and so on, how we can actually develop as well solutions. So we will be as well heading in the professional services area and build our network with key experts to actually deliver insect projects. So overall, I think we can all be happy and glad. I think we made a step forward, still a long way to go. To be honest, I think as well for the insect industry, as Heinrich mentioned, on wheat, there is a lot of noise. In insect industry, there is a lot of noise as well. And we need to get, let's say, transform this noise into traction. And I think this is what ento-connect stands for, and the people who are in this webinar stand for, that we actually make it happen. We're not just talking about that. So I wish everybody a nice summer holiday, and everybody, either speakers or participants, please let us know what you're interested in. And Heinrich mentioned it as well, that we are planning to do further webinars and we need to set up a new series. So we are very happy to align what we do in our webinars to your needs. So everybody who has ideas, suggestions, we are very, very happy, and you can just send us a mail either on the website, and I post as well the contact address. So it's contact@ento.com. I put it in the chat. So if you have any comments on the webinar, feedback on the webinar, we are always in a constant learning process and want to improve our offering. Feel free to send it to us, and as well as suggestions for future webinars, questions you still have, and of course, anything, opportunities. If you need help in your own project, feel to approach us, and we can channel it through to our network and to the experts and pull them in as needed. Okay, so thanks a lot. Have a nice weekend, and bye-bye.